70 to 90% of mergers and acquisition deals fail to deliver their expected value. Not because the spreadsheets are wrong, but because the human side was ignored. If you're thinking about an exit, or even if it feels far away, you can't afford to treat it as just a financial transaction.
Leadership today isn't just about scaling. It's about navigating constant uncertainty, market disruptions, and high-pressure decisions. If you're dealing with chaos, bottlenecks, and relentless pressure, welcome to the Business Emergency Room.
Hey, thanks for tuning in today. I'm glad you're here. We're going to talk about exits. Not just the financial mechanics, the numbers, but the subjective value, the people, the personal and emotional side. I always call it the stuff that doesn't show up in the books, but that dictates how we feel about the deal after it's done. Exits are happening everywhere. It could be because you're a baby boomer and you want to retire, or it could be owners facing health issues, or it could be businesses hitting scale limits or responding to regulatory or market shifts. The reason doesn't matter as much as this. Exits are never just financial. They're very emotional. They're always personal, no matter who the business owner is, and often exhausting. And unfortunately, too often, unplanned. There are plenty of advisors, brokers, and platforms out there to help with the legal and financial side associated with exits. From a standard SIMPREP, the confidential information memorandum, and quality of earnings reports to sales platforms and brokerage firms. That machine is pretty well oiled. But what often leaves a sour taste for both the buyers and the sellers is what happens beyond the legal documents and the spreadsheets. Because let's face it, the value of a business is really in its people. And that is much harder to quantify than parts, orders, and market shares. For most owners or business leaders, an exit is the first time and likely also the only time you'll ever go through the process. Unfortunately, also, the timing is too often unexpected. Meanwhile, the acquiring party has likely done multiple buy-side deals. They know LOIs, letters of intent. They know working capital pecs. They know escrow terms. They have reps, and they know about warranties, and they know all the lingo and the things to ask for by heart. And that imbalance shapes how negotiations unfold. Exits derail far too frequently, not because the purchase price adjustments or the EBITDA, most awful acronym in the world, ad bags were wrong, but because the human and hidden value wasn't translated. And what people thought they bought wasn't what they bought. And what people sold wasn't what they really wanted to sell. And that's where dissatisfaction creeps in. It might be the seller walking away bitter about how their legacy was treated, or it might be the buyer realizing months later that the culture class and phantom clients or missed TSA provisions, TSA is the transition service agreement, eroded the value of the deal. In general, TSA provisions erode the deal disproportionately for one side or the other, and I've seen it go both ways because they're not clear and specific enough. And if the expectations of the transferring workforce are mismatched with reality for whatever reason, and you're part of that 50% of the situation where 50% of the workforce that transferred leaves within that first year after. Yes, that's the number, almost 50%. That creates a foul taste on both the buying and the selling side, because on the buyers, that's value erosion. They're losing critical people and staff. But for you as a seller or a leader who is part of the exit, if you run into former staff that's now disgruntled and was part of those people who walked away, that will leave you with a much worse taste of what this deal was really like. I've been involved in plenty of exits and mergers and acquisitions and exits of all shapes and sizes. And I've seen the pattern, and it's the same. We spend endless hours on the legal and financial diligence because that's the system. but far too little on the non-book value, on the emotional, the cultural, and the relational side of the process. That's what this episode is about. So let's start with why exits typically hurt. We've talked about it already quite a bit, but on the owners or the seller side, the leaders involved in the deal that don't transfer with the exit or the deal, it's still deeply personal, both for them and their whole organization. And it's tied to identity and legacy and our own personal performance as a leader. Even if we don't personally own the business, the success of that deal and that exit is a reflection on us. For buyers, the frustration comes typically from lack of transparency and fear of hidden risk, but also from mismatch in communication, in the dealing with the selling organization, with too much focus on some things and not enough on the other, and sometimes the messy emotional element that comes into it. And then there is the employees, the strategic partners, the customers, all these other stakeholders that also feel anxious about continuity and about their lack of influence on the outcome, right? They're just going to have to live with whatever is agreed. And that surfaces in the process because the average deal takes 12 or 14 months to complete. So yeah, as I said, 70 to 90% of the deals fail to deliver expected value. And although some of the main consulting houses say that we're getting better at that, there is major scrutiny on whether the value is the actual value. These failure numbers have just increased the scrutiny on the books and the numbers and whether their numbers are the numbers, moving even further away from any conversation about the more subjective stuff. And as I said, almost half of the employees leave within the first year post-acquisition. 2/3 of HR leaders admit they feel completely unprepared, even still, by the time those deals are inked, 12 or 14 months in. Yeah. So that tells you that the pain isn't in the spreadsheets. It's in the culture, it's in the people, it's in misalignment. Some people swear by P&Ls. I'll tell you differently. The best negotiations, exit or otherwise, are those where both parties walk away feeling the deal was fair, where that there was value, that it was valuable to both sides, and that it's future-proof. That's the bar. I'm looking for win-win exits. I want exits where the deal is the deal, and whatever happens after does not drastically change how we feel about it. So how do we get beyond these numbers? Today, I'm going to look at it from the seller's perspective, and I'm breaking it down in 5 tips. Number 1, from the seller side, if you're working an exit, it's probably your first, potentially also your only rodeo, and you may have no time or capacity depending on what initiated this exit, right? You don't know what you don't know. It's complex, it's emotional, it's long. And you also, in the meantime, need to keep your business running at the level where it's at performing or even improve some, right? You cannot start these negotiations and then assume that the deal gets inked 12 or 14 months later, whilst in parallel, your business has been dwindling. The other side, the buying side, typically is a larger organization with more specialists and more access to specialists around import, export, tax, accounting, HR diligence, operational auditors. So tip number 1, you need support you can trust ASAP. Yeah. Because you need somebody who can translate all the terminology, can tell you what is normal and what is not normal in the request that you're going to get, who can help you with smart ways to satisfy these requests without translating your data into different spreadsheets for the sake of translating into different spreadsheets, right? How can you represent the data that you already have to satisfy the requests that are out there in a manner that works for all sides? You also need somebody who can regulate the roller coaster ride, right? Who can be your extra support when you're pulled in all directions because of what else is going on in your business, and step in that gap from you from time to time, because they are there consistently with you throughout the process. That person should also be the one who can then help you bring in specialist support as and when needed. You cannot afford the amount of specialists and people in the team that the other side has. So you need to be smart with where it is actually helpful to bring people like that in. So you need it in a fit for purpose manner. If you have lack of trust that the process will work for you from the start, or already have decided that the other party, because they're the bigger ones, are going to win, then yeah, it's a given that you're going to be dissatisfied with the outcome before you even started. And it doesn't have to be that way. So the biggest investment in the exit is to get somebody in to help you as soon as you can. Tip number 2 feels a bit like a no-brainer, but it deserves talking about. Valuation is subjective. Yeah. And beyond the EBITDA and all the other standard statements and documents that you provide and your existing contracts, valuation is shaped by perceived relational risk. If your key account looks dependent on you personally, a buyer will discount it, right? If they believe that that account has a high risk of leaving after the deal is done, that's a problem for you. But if you can demonstrate contract stickiness or high switching cost or sole source positioning, that risk shrinks. So you need to look at it from your buyer's perspective, because the perceived risk associated with what you have will be different from their eyes. And if you have information that is subjective, right, or that is in the relational sphere that can help with how they might evaluate it, you need to make sure that you bring that out. Don't just say it, though. Document it. Make sure that message is heard. If you're dealing with a larger party, stuff gets lost in translation, right? Because information gets relayed. So you need to make sure that that information is everywhere. Buyers need confidence that the relational capital moves with the deal and not with you. So this also disproportionately applies to the transition service agreement. Yeah, so this is the document where you agree in the transition who continues to do what for a while for business continuity purpose. Here, valuation, again, is subjective. And the buyer organization might kind of flippantly say, for their intents and purposes, for instance, procurement. I want you to run procurement for another 6 months because that's easiest for them. But you need to honestly have a look at how that works for you, because if you're exiting and you don't have an organization anymore and you need to keep a procurement person there, then what does procurement for 6 months mean? Because if that includes all the expediting and the shipping and the goods receipt and all that, then it's going to be much more than 6 months. And if you don't have a support organization and the people who are going to continue procurement are not linked into their finance management system, for instance, then their job might become really impossible. And for something you pay currently X might be starting to cost triple X to keep going. Right. So you need to think of the value of the elements in there, because to the buyer, it might also be a minimum inconvenience to reduce that time to 3 months, for instance, whilst it may be a big deal for you. You need to make that insightful and consider some transparency about this, because you don't want to deal for. So typically what's in these agreements is not what's going to make or break the deal, but it is what's going to make you feel good or bad about the deal after, or what's going to create messiness after the deal is done. And it's in how the value is different for the different sides of the table. Tip number 3 is about the other honest reality check. Be honest about your phantom clients or your pet projects. Every business has them. Every business has 1 or 2 clients or projects or commitments that are more sentimental than strategic. right? They might be your first and original client. They might be a small family business where they've had a lot of upheaval and you decided to grant them some leeway that has, over time become established. They may generate revenue for you. They are meaningful to you, but they really have little transferable value, if any, right? And no buying party wants to inherit these kind of relationship as part of the deal. They don't want to run those specials. That has no value to them. And so it's up to you to manage those as your own exits to sort. Be realistic about the fact that that's not got any value for anybody else. How you leave that specific relationship will have value to you. So you want to put in a bit of effort to make sure that you do that tidily and nicely. I have a great example in this space, actually. I had a friend who sold his decent sized business after a couple of decades and carved out one such client. So he had an independent business, but in partnership with a major multinational equipment supplier. So it was the integration and services part, the installation and services part, where his business resided. And when he sold into what was for him a successful deal, his clients actually got distributed over a host of different parties. He had this one client who was personal to him, who he had a special relationship with, for whom he was doing things and had a working relationship with that was different than any of the other clients. And so he still has that client. He doesn't do everything for this client, but there is certain things that client wants from him. And so he flies out a couple of times a year to see that client. He loves it. He's a former workaholic. He loves that he still has some connection to that work and to that client. And it seems to work for both of them. And eventually that will come to a natural end. But yeah, there are fun and elegant ways to deal with this. Just let's keep it clean and be realistic about the value of this to others, right? At the same time, tip number 4, you should not undersell yourself. And as a selling party who is much smaller than a buying party, you can get so caught up in staging your house, as they say, right? Staging your house with everything that you know about it to be good and that you want to showcase. And because you're busy with an exit, you're no longer focused on opportunities. But you need to look at your business or bring somebody in who can help you look at your business from the buyer's perspective. So this is by the time you're really negotiating with a specific party or specific parties, you need to highlight what's valuable to you or what could be valuable to the buyer because they're in a different situation, right? In a different setup. So I'm talking here about unrealized synergies, cross-sell opportunities, or supply chain integrations, things that you looked at and considered but never pursued due, for instance, capital limits or other constraints or timing issues, but that due to the nature of the business of your buyer or in due course might be real opportunities. You want to highlight these things. You want to make sure that that's insightful and that they make it onto the table. Again, I don't believe that these are the things that entirely make or break the deal, but they definitely make a difference in the valuation. And having acknowledgement for these opportunities alone typically makes a huge difference on how we feel about the deal, and helps negotiating on some of the fine-tuning of the deal, which typically leads to better arrangements for all sides involved around timing and practicalities on around the deal is executed. I, for one, also really do not believe in standard SIMs, right? These information management packages that tend to get generated at the beginning, like your pitch deck for your business, because the ones I see being provided as pro formas do not help you to think about unrealized or strategic or even blue sky value. Whilst it's typically there, just because you're exiting doesn't mean that the value of the business is what the business is today. So the intent of these SIMs is typically to make everything cookie cutter and ready for apples to apples comparison, so that whoever is looking quickly at a first cut on these things say, oh, this could be of value, this couldn't be of value. But to me, it's not in the seller's interest and bypasses the people element entirely. Everything that's not quantifiable typically doesn't make it into these packages. And just because it's not easily quantifiable doesn't mean it doesn't have value. The relational part is also typically completely overlooked or underestimated in that. And so I want you to have a good think about that before you put these together or use a pro forma in that space. So looking at future opportunities or unrealized value, buyers typically have way more resources and maybe the scale to unlock those. So you need to package them, map them, showcase them, and add them to what you're staging. Yeah. And don't let professional assessors reduce your business to a checklist, please. And then last but not least, I want you to bring in, when the time comes, an independent negotiator or even a negotiating team. They do. Right? They put actual negotiators at the table. It might not be the people that you've been dealing with all that time. You need somebody in the room who can bridge between all the legal, financial, and operational languages. So somebody who can make these translations quickly. Someone who knows when to pause things and to reconvene and to call in a specialist. Who can sense when there is, for instance, a MAC cause panic. Yeah. So the material adverse effect or the material adverse change, that the exit clause that gets discussed as part of the exit, or when there's TSA gaps or punch lists that start to become too long and too unrealistic, effectively making it clear that the details of the deal are not ironed out far enough, and hence we need a recycle before we continue negotiations. And somebody who keeps the emotions regulated, right? So this avoids last minute giveaways in the heat of the moment. It means that when you've thought about what your go and no-go points are, that you can actually hold these lines because you have a negotiator who helps you, guard that space. That person, that negotiator, really is your external power bank in the moment and your backbone. They are not affected by the heat of the moment emotions, and they can manage costs smartly and really help you maintain credibility and be that even negotiation partner in front of a seasoned buy-side team. So these are the moves that turn an exit from all paper and numbers into something complete and whole. And it's about ensuring that you have completeness on your side, right? And a good reality check, avoiding that overwhelm and other pressures leave you with less. And yes, this is the role I often play. I help sellers surface hidden value and weed out phantom deals and ensure buyers see the whole picture. And that usually means higher perceived value, a smoother handoff, and less deal implosions afterwards, right? A deal that's actually the deal. Because if you care about your business and your people, your duty doesn't end when the signatures hit, right? Your legacy and continuity of the business after, hidden value, they all deserve a seat at the table. So remember, exits are hard. We know that, right? Because it's personal, because it's messy, it's full of blind spots. The unplanned nature of it often doesn't help. The crunch time, the pressure. But if you do them well and you can walk away that the deal that feels like the best possible deal you made in the moment, wow, that preserves legacy. Don't let finance and legal alone dictate what happens, please. If you're considering an exit, or even just want to prepare your business so you're exit ready one day, or when that day unexpectedly comes, this is the time to make sure you're not leaving value on the table. It's not just about the books. It's about what the next chapter looks like for you and your team and your business. Whether you want to prepare a more wholesome, confidential information memorandum, SIM, or find yourself unexpectedly planning an exit now, give me a call. I really can help. And as always, if I'm not the right person for you, I will connect you to someone who is. I hope you're tuning in again next week. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of the Business Emergency Room. If you are currently dealing with chaos or disruption in your business, please reach out. You can email, text, or call, and I will find a way to connect with you within 24 hours. I've helped others steer out of the storm, and I know I can help you too. Talk soon. Please like, subscribe, and share.